Good morning, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the SNAP 2020 analysis. In this video, we'll understand how the SNAP paper 2020 was amidst the pandemic. So we'll see what were the changes like and what happened to the paper. How can we take this paper as? So let's proceed and look into what was the section all about. When I look at the paper, I find that it had 3 sections. 15 questions on general English, 25 analytical and logical reasoning, 20 questions on quantitative and data interpretation. Though they also said data sufficiency would be the part of it, but this time there was no question on data sufficiency. Marking scheme, as you know, +1 and 1 by 4 minus, that is minus 0.25. Total marks for English 15, analytical 25, quants was 20. If I look into the entire paper, I realized that the entire paper was an easy paper because one was supposed to solve 60 questions in 60 minutes. So 60 questions in 60 minutes, and the quality of questions were not abstruse variety. So anyone who would have prepared through a certain given period of time, he would have realized that this paper was a piece of cake for him. Now, moving on, we also need to understand that whenever we appear for the paper, there's always a time pressure. So we'll have to consider that condition as well. There's always a time pressure where one is supposed to attempt certain set of questions within the stipulated time. So 60 questions, 60 minutes was what we had. Let's first analyze the general English portion, and then we'll also look into the other portions. Before I proceed, let me help you out with one thing here. This also talks about the good attempts. So when I say good attempts, that would refer to as an average student would have attempted. I'm talking about the top 10% of the test takers. That's what I'm talking about. It would not refer to as an average. It would also not refer to as the median. It would not refer to as mode, but it would refer to the average of the top 10% of the students who would have attempted this question. So on an average, 12 questions in English, 15 plus questions in analytical and logical reasoning, and 15 plus in quantitative and data interpretation. Mind it, one was allowed to choose any section at any given point of time. Let me proceed and help you out with this. When I refer to the verbal ability or the English section, the best part for this section was there was no reading comprehension to it. Now, when I'm saying best part, it is not about being that I don't know reading comprehension or I cannot solve reading comprehension. But the only thing that I'm saying here is that reading comprehension still takes little time, and hence there is a probability that the student might not solve all the questions here. So that rationality was been ruled out here because there was no reading comprehension. You had good number of questions, 15 questions spread among different sections. For example, when I refer to grammar, you do have figure of speech, you do have synonyms, you have an FIB and so on. When I talk about grammar, you had only one question to get into. Then you also had figure of speech, one question again. Synonym, yes, you had one question. Fill in the blanks were been divided into 2 portions. One was all about vocabulary and second one was all about the preposition. That means we were supposed to supply a little grammatical reference to that. Idiom and phrases, you again had one question on spelling. This sentence jumble, I'll not call this as a parajumble, I'll call this more of a sentence jumble. It was one of the easiest variety. I'll tell you why. Because they only asked for the starting sentence. They did not even ask for what would be the hierarchy of it. So the best part here was sentence starting. Then they also talked about the parts of speech to identify which part of speech would this particular word be. So they gave us the sentence and we were supposed to identify which part of speech does this belong to. And that was again to find out in a correct sense. And then you had a compound word that would refer to as vocabulary and you were supposed to change that. So if you'll ask us how many questions one would have solved, I'll say 12 plus. That's what we have already discussed in the previous slide. Let's move to the next section, which is logical and analytical reasoning. Logical and analytical reasoning was on the same pattern as we all predicted. There was no change or aberration to it. same syllogism questions, same analogies questions, same course of action or assumption questions. So it was easy for the student who had prepared on a diversified references. That means it was not that one would have given more attention only to syllogism or only to analogies, but if he would have given more attention to all of the sections that they mentioned, it would have been an easy job for a student to identify the questions here. As you had 4 questions on course of action, assumption 1 question, you also had letter series, you had input output as 2 questions, which are again easy to solve. Moving to the clocks and calendars, 2 questions each, easy one to solve again. Overall, if you'll talk about how was the logical and analytical reasoning section, one would say easy, provided one was prepared for it. Blood relations, again in few seconds, not even 1 minute, 45 seconds, this question was easy to be solved. You also had questions on number series, circular arrangements, coding, decoding, and there were 2 miscellaneous variety of questions which cannot be categorized anywhere. But again, those 2 questions were again easy to solve. So if we talk about how many questions in logical and analytical reasoning, I would say 15 plus. 15 plus was an easy job for anybody to solve in here. So when I'm saying 15 again, I am on a lower side. I'm not on the high side. Because we have seen there are students who have done gross 18 to 19 questions correct. So again, if the paper is easier, the number of correct questions would go up, and hence the overall percentage or the percentile or the marks would also go up. So here also we could see that it was more than 15 questions which were gross correct in this section. Moving to the next section, which is quantitative and data interpretation. One good part, it did not have data sufficiency this time, so it was easy for students to look into. Probability, you had 2 questions. DI, 1 question. Ratio, 1 question. Percentage, 1 question. It was all about finding which were the easy questions first. Here, all those students who had done a little scanning and had realized that which question can be solved as a tier 1 question, it was easy for all those students to crack this section easily. Though again, it had only 20 questions in it, but again, there are many students who have solved more than 15 questions as well. So we are on the lower side. We say it should be 15 questions at least, which should be gross correct. For the remaining questions, either 1 or 2 questions, you might not be very much sure of, you might have left that question, but still we say 15 questions is something that one should have solved in correct here. It had all the topics, the one that they talked about, whether it is profit and loss, whether it is time, speed, distance, whether it is time in work, or whether even if it is logs, permutation, combination, and even averages. 15 questions. It was easy to solve for most of the students here. So if you look into the entire paper, we realize the paper comes out to be as an easy paper, but we'll have to wait for another 2 days as well. Then only anything concrete can be said. What should be the exact percentage, percentile, or the marks that one student should get? Or having said this, we would say that the paper was easy for all the students who were prepared for it, and for all the students who knew how to attempt any of the questions. So all the students who had taken mocks properly and would have done analysis well, the students would have surely cracked the paper. A little estimation of what would be the marks for the top institutes of Symbiosis. So if we talk about Pune, 43 marks, 43 plus marks indeed, is what that we expect. For SEMHRD, we expect 40 marks. For others, we expect 35 marks. So I'm sure you would have got this picture for how your paper went. And all those students who are looking at this now, I'm sure you would have formulated your strategy according to the requirement of the paper. So that was the part for it. Thank you. Bye-bye.